Hi, Lisa.
Cathrin.
Welcome to our next Get Mindful talk.
You.
Great to see you again. Finally, we are sitting here in a t-shirt, not longer in our warm pullovers. Summer is here. Yes. So we have great topics for this week. This week's focus will be on judgment and non-judgment. And this is exactly also where we want to start today. Non-judgment and how we can observe witnessing with detachment, so without attachment. And yeah, we just decided that we will speak about this like kind of next level, because when you are following our Get Mindful talks, you heard already that yeah, there is a lot of deliberation when you are not judging. But being in our daily life, we are facing that it's not that easy, that even when we have this kind of concept in mind, or have this understood and have it understood and have the buy-in, yes, makes sense, I get it. Yes, I want to try to be less judgmental. It happens that we are finding us back in situations where we are now in the state that we can observe, oh, again, this thought, which is so common to me, is back, but it's still a judgmental thought. And for example, I know it a lot from friends that when you are that in every relationship you have your own definition of how the house has to look like, or how you are dealing with the kids, etc. And when then you are kind of switching the roles, and your partner is doing it, and then you are coming back in the evening, and everything looks quite different, and it's not new to you because you know it, that because it kind of always looked like this. But nevertheless, it's quite easy to find yourself back in thought patterns which are very used to you, which you might haven't had due to Corona period or whatever for a certain period, but yeah, which are kind of still there. And so I would like to talk with you today about this kind of how can we implement the non-judgment on a deeper level, or how can we do the next step, so we are at the phase we are seeing our judgmental thought, but we still kind of have them. So what's then the next level? Is it not having them anymore, or dealing with them differently, or why do we have them? Because we had already understood it. Tell us how to progress.
You know, I can only speak from my experience, and
Yeah, sure.
from all the teachings that I've heard and have worked through. And I think for me, there's a couple of aspects that I think are very helpful, and that are important for us to understand to really move into this aspect of non-judgment. I think the first thing that's very important, and you touched upon that now, is when the mind understands something, that doesn't mean we're immediately able to integrate that into our daily experience. The mind learns very quickly. You know, the mental energies are very subtle, and they move very quickly, and we can move very quickly to intellectual understanding. But to get to this visceral level of living that teaching, that can be really, you know, that's a much slower process. And I think we need to give our emotions just a lot more time, and allow our emotions to sort of slowly work up to a mental intellectual understanding. And so, because a lot of our emotions are caught up in patterns, of course, just like our mind, and the intellectual understanding may help break the intellectual pattern, but we'll still have this emotional pattern. And of course, an emotional pattern, as soon as an emotion comes up, it's going to trigger thoughts. And so, you know, the thing that we understood in a neutral situation may no longer be quite so clear to us as soon as the emotion arises, because the emotion will re-trigger the old thought pattern, and the whole thing will start from the beginning. So that's the first one. And then I think it's also very important to understand that the mind is judgment. The mind categorizes, the mind judges, the mind discerns the difference from one object to another object, from one color to another color, from one person to another person. So discernment, judgment, and you know, seeing differences and categorizing. This is what the mind does. So, you know, we're easiest if we don't get all caught up into it. You know, this is what the mind does. And the mind consists of discernment and judgment. And not all judgment is bad per se. You know, we need to be able to judge. I need to judge the difference of riding my bicycle on a bike path or riding my bicycle on the highway. It's good that I can make, you know, that I can make that call, that I can make that judgment. So not all judgment is bad. I think the important thing is that we are aware of the fact that we are judging, and aware of the fact that we are categorizing, and that we, at least in the beginning, have an intellectual understanding that the judgments and the categories and the kind of the boxes that we put things in are very contextual. You know, they're not truth.
Yeah.
These are not truths. They're just helpful for the moment. And if we believe them to be true, then they're non-helpful. Then they become a prison. If we believe them to be fluid, just as they are, you know, for the moment, helpful and contextual and kind of suggestions, proposals, as we would, you know, a good idea for the moment, then we're less caught up in them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. Judgment is natural, and judgment is okay. And we teach our children to judge also. You know, it's a different thing for a child to speak to a tall, dark man in a dark alley with, you know, a hood over his head, or, you know, in dark, or his beloved grandmother or something. Obviously, the child needs to learn how to discern and judge between these two situations to stay safe in our world. So judgment does have a good side. Judgment becomes difficult when we don't see it.
Yeah.
When we begin believing that our judgments and our categories and all this is that they're true. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing. And then you said fairly early when you began speaking of something about trying not to judge. And I think this is where the problem comes in, is because we try not to judge, right? And so what happens is we make a judgment, and then we judge the judgment. Oh, I shouldn't judge. And so, yeah, this is how we do it. It's a natural progression. We see the judgment, and then we think, oh my God, I'm not supposed to be judging. Judging is bad. And so we judge ourselves for judging. Mm-hmm. And this can get real complicated. You know, this is a real complex thing. And then we get all caught up in the judgment of the judgment of the judgment that we judged. And then wow, you never come out of it again. And so I think when we do that, we're trying to put the cart before the horse. Judgment, we can't make judgment go away. Making judgment go away is judging the judgment, and is a sneaky way that the ego kind of comes in through the back door. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we're at, this topic of observing, you know, of just seeing. And it's non-judgment is not judging the judgment, just seeing the judgment, you know, noticing the judgment is our perspective, looking out of our eyes. And if I can learn how to, number one, look out of my eyes, and number two, look at my judgment, and look at it with openness and benevolence, and realize this is just, you know, how my conditioning has allowed me to become. And I'm not saying that that judgment is good and that we should follow through on the judgment. That's not the case, but we can look at it with detachment. Mm-hmm. And like I say, kind of with a a kind eye, and know that the judgments that we have, they were useful to us at one point, but they're not truth. And so I just see that I'm judging, and the more detached I can become from my own judgments, that the ones that are helpful, okay, that's helpful for the moment, but I know it's not true, then the less and less I will begin to judge. You know, judgment comes as an effect of detachment, and detachment does not come from judgment. So we can't go the judgment route. We have to go through the seeing the judgment and allowing the judgment to be, and not necessarily acting on the judgment, and just recognizing it for what it is, just a very empty category that sometimes is true and sometimes not, and just see that and allow myself to have judgments, because I need it. Otherwise I will ride my bike on the highway, or, you know, I won't be here for very long. So having judgment is good, but realize that it's not truth. And then the judgments go back. Then I'm not as quick to judge.
Okay. So when we are then in the situation, or like transferring it from I'm not judging myself because I did judge, but I'm seeing, oh, interesting, you are judging right now. Then we are just saying, interesting, you judge like in this and that categorization, or categorizing, but it's neither the one nor the other true. Or how do we then kind of go on, because we still have this, I don't like it as it is in the situation right now.
Exactly. I think sometimes it's just helpful when you feel something. If I can think of a situation I know used to come up an awful lot when my son was younger, and I would come home and the house would be a mess and his socks would be laying everywhere, and I could feel, you know, the anger coming up. He should have asked him to do this. He should have done this. And so, you know, the house isn't as clean as it used to be. He's lazy. You know, these thoughts would arise. And I'm not now saying that I was always able to do this, but now in hindsight, I can see it's most helpful to allow those feelings to come up. You see the judgment, notice that you're judging, realize that, and take the emotions that come up with it. In my case, it would be anger, impatience, from the judging of he's not doing enough, he's messy, you know, and feel those emotions that come up, and realize, okay, these are just past, these are judgments, these are just simply empty judgments. I have no idea what the situation is. I don't know what's going on. You know, maybe something came up. Maybe he's just too tired. Irrelevant. It's judgment, and in the judgment creates an emotion, and just to spend time with that emotion at the physical level, to feel the emotion, you know, spread through the body, as it were. You know, that hotel, allow the unwanted guests to come into the hotel. Be with the unwanted guests perhaps for a while, a cup of tea, a cup of bread, and then move on, and you know, not act out of that. Now, sometimes it might be helpful to enter into a communication, which is, hi, you know, good to see you, nice to be home.
Yeah.
And then maybe say, you know, gosh, I feel like the house is pretty messy. Maybe we can talk about that. And I think in reacting then out of this calmness, and not completely rejecting the judgment as wrong, but also not accepting the judgment as right, seeing judgment, and notice that judgment creates an emotion, feeling the emotion, not allowing the emotion to create reactivity based on the judgment.
Yeah.
Feeling the emotion, and then allowing that emotion to be there. Not running away from it, not running away from the situation, not saying, okay, I'm wrong because I judged, or this person is wrong because they did the wrong thing. But you just go to that person and give them insight into your thoughts, into those judgments.
Yeah.
And truth. It's just how I'm feeling right now, and maybe we can talk about it. Maybe you can tell me how you're feeling and what's going on, and then you can open up a conversation about that. And it's very helpful. And so we're not denying the feelings that we have. I know I come back and back again, always again, to this emotional aspect of feeling something, but we don't want to repress it. And of course, the feeling comes from that judgment of that situation. We're judging the situation, or we're judging ourselves, or we're judging. But I see the judgment, and I don't judge the judgment, because judgment is human nature. It's good. Learning is developing a sense of judgment. And so I feel it and I see it, but I don't run away with it or allow it to run away with me. And then initiate a conversation. And of course, now it sounds so easy. It's like, oh, everybody should be able to do that. And we know it's not easy. We know this can be very, very, very trying when the emotion is strong.
Yeah, and what I would say, what makes it that difficult is that this judgment creates the emotion, what you just said, and that if you're not mindful with what's going on in the situation, then you are quickly like caught up by the emotions. And then they are dominant, and what you just said, the reactive behavior, etc. And I would say this is also why there is this kind of recommendation: be less judgmental, or just judge where it's helpful, because we don't want to have these emotions which are dysfunctional. Right?
Less judgmental than we are, and the judgment goes, this automatic judging, this reduces only with witnessing. That goes back, the more I'm able to just look at it and not get all judgmental about my judgment. The minute I try to repress something or to stop doing something, I'm going to stop judging, the more I'm going to judge. So anything I try to push away or hold on to, anything I try to push away is going to increase, because going into that. So this trying to judge less is going to create more judging, because now I'm judging the judging on top of everything else. So it automatically increases. I mean, we all know the feeling of walking down a shopping center or a busy street, and your mind will go from one judgment to the next about people, about this situation, about that, and he's too fast, and he's too slow, and all this stuff going on in your mind. Just look at it, just see it, and know that this is what it's like to be a human being. I allow the mind to do it, but I don't get involved.
Yeah.
That's kind of the teaching, to be there with it, to observe that judging mind, and allow that judging mind to be, but don't get caught up in the judging mind. And the more I let that judging mind be without getting caught up in it, then it will reduce. But it will not reduce if I try to reduce it.
Yeah. That's the tricky part. That's the part which is always the same. Like, don't refuse it, then it will get more. But which is also the tricky part. Great. Perfect. So let me quickly summarize, because there have been a couple of very valid points in like general understanding of what's meant by non-judgment. So first of all, you said that it's really normal that the mind is learning quickly on an intellectual basis, but the emotions are not caught up in patterns that takes some time and needs some time. Then it's the natural state of mind that the mind is judgmental or is judging and categorizing, and this is not all of it bad. We need it to to live, and also we are teaching it to our kids and so on. So we need this kind of quality of our mind, that it is judgmental. But what we don't want is that we think that the categories which the judgment is creating are true. So the next step is then, or the third important aspect was that we are accepting that we are judging and not judging ourselves for judging. So, because otherwise, and this is then kind of the fourth point, we are too much resisting on the judging, and then it's just getting more and more, and it's like the way to get less caught up in the judgment, because the judgment will be always there. This is how I understand it. But to be less caught up in the judgment is to see it kind of from a higher perspective, like to see. And I like your example just at the end, when we are walking through these streets or to a shopping mall, just seeing how quickly, how often in a minute the mind is judging, and just observing that the mind is judging. And once we are getting to this point, then we have created the ability to avoid that we enter this responsive behavior, that we because the judgment create emotions, but we don't want to get caught up in these emotions, and then we can still kind of have our judgment, but reacting from a point of calmness and having more constructive discussions or conversations, etc., whatever is needed in the situation. Cool. Thank you very much for our topic today of non-judgment. And I'm looking forward to our next talk, where we will get to the next step, how to go on with the non-judgment. Thank you very much, Lisa. Bye-bye.